China was entering a dark time in the 1970s, called the Cultural Revolution. At that time, anybody who was found to be against Chairman Mao would be put into prison. It is said that thousands of innocent people were framed as anti-communist people. Some were in prison the whole life, but some were released after the Cultural Revolution ended. My story of a primary school teacher took place in the 1960s. As a Chinese teacher who had read quite a lot of books, Mr. Li was humorous and frank while teaching. Naturally, the children in his class preferred a teacher like him and always asked him to teach more even after class. Therefore, his colleagues were jealous of his talent and disliked his straightforward and sometimes impetuous personality. Their hatred planted the seed of his tragedy. It was the darkest time of Communist China. All the states were ordered to target a certain amount of righteous and punish them. In many eyes, Mr. Li was definitely one of the top choices in his school for penalizing. The excuse his colleagues easily found for penalizing him was that he humiliated Chairman Mao during one of his class by stating that the chairman once hid himself in a ditch to escape the capture from enemies. Although Mr. Li cried it and pleaded to the judge that he was actually praising the Chairman Mao by commending his intelligence and calmness, the local government sentenced him to a prison term of 8 years for the crime of counter-revolution. He tried to prove himself innocent by finding the reference from which he cited the story about Chairman Mao. Unfortunately, he couldn't remember either the name or the author of the book, which was his last chance to prove himself innocent. After being put into prison, his only possibility of salvation lay with a seemingly impossible person, his 6 months pregnant and illiterate wife. After the baby was born, it's even harder for that woman to support the family. However, instead of divorcing her husband, the steadfast woman raising their child on her own. In the darkest age of China, when all the literature books were forbidden and all the people around could be enemies, she collected any possible paper with words and begged their neighbors to read to her, hoping to find a story regarding Chairman Mao. During her 7 years of searching for the story, the villagers would always see a strange woman with a basket on her arm and a child on her back, searching every corner of the street and trash heaps, knocking on the doors of impatient but literate people and begging them on her knees to read the paper she had collected. Yes, the villagers would always see her, whether the town was frozen with ice or burnt by the sun. This faithful countrywoman believed in her husband and their brilliant future, until her house and all the papers she had collected were burned into ashes by an accident fire, a hazard triggered by a cooking fire that also took the life of both her and her little child. As we know, the darkest hour is nearest to the dawn. During the last half of his 8th year in prison, with the sorrow of losing his family and being desperate to finding any hope of rehabilitation, Mr. Li miraculously found the story. Due to the deficiency of the supply, the government had been using pages of discarded books as toilet paper, and the story declaring Chairman Mao hurried off from the hill, hid himself in a ditch, was printed right on the page Mr. Li was using in the toilet to clean himself. With a quote on the toilet paper, he eventually found the original book containing the full story about Chairman Mao, handed it to the judge and proved his innocence. He had survived, and a new life was waiting for him. However, the family and the happy life he should have enjoyed had permanently disappeared. Although in history, Mr. Li was just a small part of the giant scar on Communist China, I consider him a hero for his bravery in not giving up despite the extreme adversity that he faced. He had to survive in the prison only to prove his innocence. Maybe the only hope he got is to meet with his family again. I admire him for his strong desire to pursue freedom.